Dominion Voting Systems did not reach a pretrial settlement with Fox News in its historic defamation lawsuit against the network. The trial began today as scheduled. Jurors have been selected, according to the Washington Post's Jeremy Barr, who's live tweeting from the courtroom, or trying to live tweet from the courtroom. The judge presiding over the case is taking special steps to ensure the jury is not compromised, telling jurors just an hour ago, quote, "You cannot talk about the case amongst yourselves or with any third party. Don't do any detective work. Don't do any kind of research. Stay away from social media. You cannot do any independent research. Don't compromise yourself."
Now, they already excused one juror, it turns out. There was a juror who said that he had been up all night and doesn't think he can do this. So they're going to get an alternate there, I believe. And then, yes, they were giving the rules you laid out. Apparently someone, a Fox News staffer, violated them because this staffer was asked to leave the courtroom. And then that staffer said, well, everyone else is tweeting, so what did I do wrong? Something like that. The judge asked people to type less loudly in the courtroom, so an effort to impose order. Obviously, this trial is proceeding. It did not. There was a delay yesterday. We suspected possibly because Fox was trying to settle with Dominion. That evidently did not happen.
And people, we should talk about what that means. People who wanted there to be some accountability, obviously people who are more inclined to the left, really wanted this to go to trial, because look at what we've learned so far just from the discovery process about the behind the doors perspective among Fox News hosts versus their public-facing perspective about some of the stop the steal rhetoric. You have behind closed doors Tucker Carlson saying some pretty harsh things about his opinion about Donald Trump, that he hopes he can go away and they can stop talking about him. I don't want to misquote him, so I'm trying to pull it out, but something along the lines that he really loathes him, really. And despite that, they're being accused of repeatedly having guests on and elevating voices who falsely accused these two voting software companies of rigging the vote against Donald Trump. So if we learn that much just from the discovery process, I think the hope for people who are left-leaning or who are critical of Fox News or who are just want to support the election of the democracy, that we will learn more about what's been going on at the network.
I understand why those people are salivating for more details like that. However, a settlement could have had the impact of sanctioning or punishing this media organization, if you think that's appropriate, without having a kind of ruling that I'm worried opens the door for greater restrictions of journalists, of other news outlets, fearing that they could engage in libel defamation by platforming guests whose perspectives end up being wrong and defamatory. Again, this isn't just, we're not talking just about suing the people who made the false claims about Dominion, but the people who asked them questions about the claims they were made and put them on their television shows. This is not just a lawsuit aimed at Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell. If it was, I would be much more inclined to include conclusively that yes, they said. I mean, in fact, the fact that they said false things has now been is like not even in the realm of dispute for this trial. The previous judge ruled we're not ruling on that. You've decided, it's been decided that these were false statements. That's not really being contested. What is being contested is whether the company takes on liability for engaging in people who share this perspective. And I worry very much about the precedent from a First Amendment standpoint. I mean, I'm not a big fan, honestly, of libel and defamation as categories overall. They are exceptions to a free speech norm, to the idea that you can't be held responsible just for speech. I don't know that they make a lot of sense in the modern world, frankly, but here we are.
Right. Well, in a world where we still do have defamation laws, I think there is a legitimate case here that this qualifies, given that we know, again, from the behind-the-scenes documents, that there was an active, open conversation about how there was no rigging here. There was not a level of fraud that could change the outcome of the election. We know that this story in its totality is bunk, and yet there's still a choice to have guests on, guests who you know what they're going to say. You're having them on because you know they're going to promote a certain kind of narrative. And even if there is some pushback at various times on the show, whether or not that
tremendous
constitutes...
pushback, right? Tucker did a whole monologue calling Sidney Powell to task.
So the
making
choice,
these unfounded claims.
what's illegal, what is potentially defamatory, what is the violation here is that they've repeatedly brought people on to say things that they know is true, that know is not true. So if I performatively push back when I know, one, that information is wrong, because I've said in my private text messages and emails that I know the information is wrong, but I want to take advantage of the fact that the public has an appetite for a certain message and want to create some legitimacy for myself and say, well, are you sure? Are you sure? You don't want to incentivize, especially news people, to basically say, I can have a private view that this is not in fact news, that this is specious, that this is defamation of a business. And remember, this is a business that has its own business interests that arguably it should be able to protect under the law. To say that as long as a host pushes back occasionally, they can continue to actively foster a narrative that they know not to be true, largely because Fox News wants to keep a pro-Trump audience that it knows, and this is again from what we know from the discovery, that it knows has a strong appetite for stop the steal narratives. I think that's part of the problem. So again, I want to be specific because I mentioned it before, and I don't want to misquote Tucker Carlson. What he said was in a text sent on January 4th, 2021, we are very, very close to being able to ignore Trump most nights. He added, I hate him passionately. This is a man who just, interviewed Donald Trump a few nights ago in a very cordial environment.
I mean, I don't know that that's a contradiction, though. I don't care for Trump personally. I try not to use colorful language in general. I don't care for Trump whatsoever. And yet I agreed with a lot of the things he said in that interview with Tucker Carlson about foreign policy. You probably would as well. It was substantially about the Ukraine-Russia parts. So you can have some contempt for the position Trump has put you in, or the conservative movement, or even Fox News or the Republican Party, while still interviewing him and think he has interesting, insightful things to say. But the question is,
if you know someone. He said the following about Trump. The last 4 years, we're all pretending we've got a lot to show for it because admitting what a disaster it's been is too tough to digest. But come on, there really isn't an upside to Trump. Someone who clearly has substantive criticisms of Donald Trump in their personal life, but in their interviews never bring up any of those questions.
Well, go ahead and criticize that, but make him pay $1 billion, make the company work for $1 billion.
Finish this. Come on, to be fair. It's the journalism. Your job is not. There are people that I like and people that I don't like, but his job as a journalist, knowing that he has these private concerns, to not bring them up publicly is a dereliction of his responsibility as a journalist. We all know that I have my own politics, and there are candidates that I like. I obviously worked for Bernie Sanders, but if I sit down with Bernie Sanders someday and give him a softball interview, where I don't ask him about why he hasn't said more about Julian Assange, why he hasn't spoken out to members of the Progressive Caucus as they voted to end the railroad strike. But, on and on and on, then I deserve that kind of criticism.
But criticism of him as a journalist, or you in that example, is different from saying you should pay $1 billion fine for having not handled that correctly.
Right. Well,
the people who should pay are the people who made the false claims.
No, the people who should pay are the people who also knowingly promoted false claims to earn money for their network.
We disagree. I don't want to create a situation where media companies are disincentivized from pursuing dangerous or thought to be false lines of questioning. I think that could affect us. I think it could affect all sorts of people who are trying to arrive at the truth, or a truth that is uncomfortable for the mainstream media, on COVID, on foreign policy, on a bunch of things. I think this is a slippery slope to a very dangerous precedent.
That might be true if you think that there is a high volume of, I know this story is absolute malarkey and we should talk about it anyway because it gets us ratings. Because that's what's come out of these depositions and this discovery process and this lawsuit. That people have said there is no value to this story, there's nothing here that's true.
Call them out
and
for
we
it.
should continue
I would call out if people at CNN and MSNBC were doing that. I wouldn't call for them to be sued out of existence.
So this is the question. Even if you think this doesn't raise to the level of actually having to be liable for this, this is why people want this trial to go forward. Because there's an argument, I think a strong argument, that Fox News viewers, it's the most popular news show in America, deserve to have journalists that are bringing their full selves to these interviews and not pulling punches because of ratings or feelings that they have, got to personally protect various candidates. That is not journalism. And whatever you think about the potential liability of Fox News as a network, I think this is why people have an appetite for this trial going forward. It's not just about wanting blood out of Fox, although obviously there's people like that. There are a lot of Fox News viewers that are across the political spectrum. It is the most popular show in America. And I think a lot of people are very chagrined to hear.
I think the people most interested in this trial are rival media organizations like CNN and MSNBC that want to see a rival humiliated and punished and don't know how this could be used against them as well.
You can try to minimize the absolute failure and journalism malpractice that Tucker Carlson and some of these other people on this network have demonstrated by privately having serious thoughts, issues, questions, and concerns about Donald Trump that they never have the courage to ask him to their face. You can say, well, there's other liberals who are in bad faith, so none of this matters. But I'm looking out for the good faith viewers of Fox News and news consumers across this country who deserve to have journalists that are going to ask politicians hard truths. Because in the absence of that, we have these corporate duopolies that can continue to run ramshot over our entire population. And who's going to stand in the way? Certainly not this transparent fourth estate.
I've disagreed with any number of people on that network, and I criticize them when I do. I think it's different when we could all be affected by a precedent of how we conduct our coverage.
Well,
I think that should be up to the news networks, and then you can not watch them or criticize them all you want. You don't take them to court.
The way to stay safe,
you don't
Rodney,
take people to court who...
The way to stay safe is not to write down, I think the next guest is going to say nothing of value and is actually going to lie on the air, but we should have him on anyway because he's going to make money for our network. As long as you don't write that down, it seems like you're in pretty good shape.
All right. We'll continue to follow this. More Rising right after this.